Sure. My name is David Booher, and I am the writer and co-creator of Canto, along with a few other books, Killer Queens from Dark Horse, and Firefly from Boom, and Joe Hill's Reign from Image Comics.
And I'm Drew Zucker. I'm the artist and co-creator of Canto and The House. And yeah, that's pretty much my deal.
So Canto is here promoting, you have a new book coming out. Can you tell us a little bit about the latest adventure?
Sure, it's called Canto, Tales of the Unnamed World. And it's a 2-issue miniseries that's kind of an anthology of sorts, where Canto and friends are sort of on this adventure going back home after a big quest in the City of Giants. And they encounter a bard that demands a story. They tell a story that he's never heard in all of the Unnamed World. And so we've invited some guest artists like Liana Kangas, Jorge Corona, Sean Daly to draw these little short stories that the characters are telling to this bard to try to get across the bridge. Yeah.
And did they do the writing and the art as well, so it's in different styles?
No, so they all came in just as artists, and David and I took a bunch of stories that we had wanted to tell throughout the run of the book that we just couldn't find a place for them, and instead David was able to kind of distill them down to these shorter versions that we were then able to bring everybody in and let them kind of run with it and do their own version of the world.
So you gave them kind of free reign artistically, or was it more of a collaborative process?
It was basically free reign. I wrote the scripts, and these are 5 or 6 page short stories, and as long as they sort of got the character designs, we love Jorge Corona, we love Liana, we love Sean, and that's why we invited them to do this, because their styles are so different and so cool, and it was so great to see them realize our characters we've been working with for years now in this new cool Sean does watercolor, and that was just the coolest thing to see. His characters in watercolor.
Jorge brings his own spin to everything. Liana brings her own spin to it. So it was great to see them take designs that we had done that we know very well, and then bring their own sensibilities into the world.
From both a writing and an art point of view, how does your work on the X series evolve and change with each new edition?
From the writing and the scripting perspective, we started out with a very specific idea of the story we wanted to tell. And when folks wanted to continue reading Canto, we got the opportunity to really expand the world and explore the world. And we had an idea where we ultimately wanted to end up, but to be able to explore that, I think we're 23 issues in at this point. And it's the evolution of going to different places in this world and figuring out what's out there has been really an incredible experience, I think, for both of us from the writing and the art perspective.
From the art perspective, nothing's necessarily changed as much as there's been a desire to just expand what we've been doing. And as I've become more comfortable with everything we're doing and the visual language of the world, it's given me more opportunity to take the things that David puts into script and then just run with it. So if David starts with the seed of an idea, we now understand the world so well that it can just be grown out visually into something far beyond what we even initially planned for.
And of course, when Drew does something and pushes himself, with his skill and stuff, I look at that and I go, oh, if he can do that,
he can do this.
Then let's try to do this. And we just are constantly pushing each other to, up the game and just make it even better and better every time.
Can you tell us a little bit about the origins of your partnership and how you guys came together?
Yeah, so I think it was 2017, 2018.
Yeah.
When we connected on social media, and I just really liked Drew's style, so I reached out on a short story, and he wasn't available because he was working on The House, his other book at the time. And then he became available, and he sent me. He reached back out and he sent me a sketch that he had done for years ago.
Yeah.
that ultimately became Canto. And I have to say, the second I saw that sketch in my inbox, it took about 2 seconds for me to go, I don't know who this character is and I don't know what the story is, but we are telling it. I just was so drawn to this character. And so Drew had an idea for a story. We kind of got together, we crafted it. I'm a huge Wizard of Oz fan, and Drew's a huge Dante's Inferno fan. So we melded the two together to create this all-ages fairy tale about a clockwork knight in search of a heart.
For me, that whole journey started in 2012 when I did the original sketch, and it had a paragraph for what I thought the story should be. The idea of this all-ages adventure was always there, but it was put in a drawer and left to kind of develop and wait for the right partner to come along. And when David came along, it just so happened that he saw the vision of what I wanted to do with it and took it and blew it out into what it is now and made it into something that's more, more focused than even where it started. But so much of what this was is just the blending of both of us.
Can you tell us a little bit about your process working together? Do you break stories together and then sort of trade off, or is everything fully collaborative?
It's very collaborative for the most part. We'll talk about the ideas. We have such a close partnership on this book. Every single day we're talking, we're sending messages back and forth. So we will talk about story and where things are going to go. And then I'll take it and I'll do an outline. We'll talk about that. And then I'll take it and I'll do the scripts, and then we'll get on the phone and we'll talk about that. And usually by the script stage, we're pretty well aligned with where we want to go with it. And then when Drew gets the script and starts doing the art, I'll get messages with, snapshots of panels, snapshots of pages. What do you think of this? This layout. And so it's a constant back and forth, this close relationship that this book would not exist without that constant exchange.
There's also, we keep each other in check on it, and we definitely will push back on ideas or visuals to see if there's a better way. The pushback isn't necessarily always correct sometimes, but it's at least worth the pushback, because if the other one thinks that, no, I'm going to stand my ground on this needs to be in the story, then it usually will either lead to something even better through those conversations, or it'll, what was originally there is good enough that's why that person wanted to fight for it. But the whole process is very collaborative between us.
So you guys are sitting in front of the Lock and Key house, the actual prop from the actual show. And you were telling me off camera that Lock and Key got you into comics. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of how you got into this medium?
Sure. So I was not, the comics that I read and I was exposed to when I was a kid was like Mad Magazine, the Sunday Funnies, that sort of thing. So I wasn't a comic book reader. I came to comics in the comic book form in the mid-2000s when I started coming to San Diego Comic-Con. And one of the first long-form comics I read was Lock and Key. And I had no idea that comics could tell that type of story, or that like the visuals could be presented that way. I just had no idea that was even possible. And so when I read it, I loved Lock and Key so much that it inspired me to go down this path of actually making comics. And to this day, it's my favorite comic of all time. And I've gone back and I've read lots of comics. But Lock and Key for me still is that inspirational story that showed me what comics is capable of.
I was always a comics kid growing up, and then as I got older, I kind of fell away from it until I went to college. I went to the Savannah College of Art and Design for their sequential program. At that point, I kind of fell headfirst back into comics, and things like Y the Last Man, DMZ, that kind of Vertigo, early 2000s heyday really sucked me back into comics. But a lot like David, I discovered Lock and Key, and even though I was in it, I remember finishing Lock and Key, closing the last page and going, I want to tell stories like this. Like, this is, it just struck a chord. And it's something that he and I have bonded over, that these are the types of stories that we want to tell, that we believe in the medium, and we want the medium to grow through this kind of storytelling.
That's amazing that it was like the same title for both of you. That's
well,
crazy.
and I think that's why the partnership on Canto works so well, because my inspiration for Canto are things like Dark Crystal, Neverending Story, Secret of Nim, and Drew, you've talked about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Ghostbusters, but Secret of Nim for me too. That's
Ghostbusters, but it's all that kind of, it's all ages, but it's kind of, there's a little bit of a darkness to it. And I wouldn't say Lock and Key is necessarily, the comic is necessarily all ages, because there is some violence to it. But it's got this brightness and this darkness, and that magical mix of those things is what we try to bring to Canto. It's a coincidence that we both love Lock and Key, but actually, I don't know if it's a coincidence, because that's the kind of stuff we love.
Yeah.
So it doesn't surprise me that we both love that series.
Can you talk a little bit about taking your idea and your comic and getting it published and getting it out into the world?
It's scary. it is a scary prospect to take the thing that is generally a very isolating process, because it's usually just me and him working. Eventually a colorist will come in, a letterist will come in, but it's so personal to both of us that when you bring a publisher into it, and you bring in now Comic-Con and the fans, you're putting yourself out there in a very vulnerable space. But for fans to have embraced it the way they have is just beyond, I think, anything that we could have ever imagined it would do.
Yeah, and it was totally unexpected. But then I think about it, and when I think back to when we were first creating Canto, we both very quickly had the perspective of, if this gets to a publisher, fantastic. If it doesn't, we're still going to make this because we love it.
Yeah.
And the more time that goes by and the more readers we get on board, the more I think about that was part of the magic mix to make it successful, was the passion that we had to tell Canto's story regardless of anybody else coming on board with it. And so it kind of all goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
But those magical early days, we saw it coming to life, and we knew that we were going to pursue the story regardless of if it was IDW, if we did it through Kickstarter, if we had to do it all on our own, we were going to do this.
There is a degree of obsessive passion that came with this project of, we're going to do it, like, no matter what. And it's just purely out of desire to need to get that story out and that storytelling.
So what are you most excited for fans to read in the new version?
I'm excited for them to see where this kind of heads towards as we kind of move towards our end game for the series.
So you do have an end game planned?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
We're actually working on creative for the 4th volume right now, which is going to come out next spring, so spring of 23. Particularly for Tales of the Unnamed World, there is a backstory that we've had in our minds for a very long time. Canto has basically his Toto, if you want to talk in Wizard of Oz terms, which is this big beastly creature that's kind of like a gorilla, dog, lion, loyal companion to him. And the fans really love this character, and so we get the opportunity to actually tell some backstory about this Canto's like best friend companion for this creature, and it was an opportunity that we couldn't pass up.
Yeah. It's great too, because it's just more of what we've done with the series, where we do the way we like to do our world building isn't necessarily in your face, but in the background. And this gave us a chance to tell a whole new side of the world with a character that the fans know, but give them a new perspective on it.
Great. And tell us where we can get the book and where we can find you on social media.
You can find all the volumes of Canto, Canto 1, 2, 3. We're going to have the collection of City of Giants and Tales of the Unnamed World comes out in November. You can get all of those wherever books are sold, major bookstores or comic book stores. You can find me on social media on Instagram at David M. Booher, Twitter at David Booher. We both stream on the Whatnot app, so I'm at David Booher on Whatnot.
On Instagram, I am at Art of Drew Zucker. On Twitter, I am at Drew_Zucker. And on Whatnot, I am Art of Drew Zucker.